restricted from participating in that instruction. So just want to reiterate that this is a parent opt-in for the sexual health and reproduction instruction. And then I'd like to also introduce Gina Foxman, who served as our co-chair, who is a parent in the district, and she is going to be presenting some information around the process for SHAC to you today. And of course, Executive Director Michael Ruiz, who has been supporting this effort throughout, and I'll turn it over to the team. Thank you.
And I want to reiterate the thanks. Truly, the SHAC has been a labor of love, and nobody is paid for their participation. They're donating their time just out of love for our district. And the SHAC really is about making sure that the local community values are reflected in our health education. And that's what the parents and community members were out to do. Before that process even started, we only received one approved material from the state Board of Education, which prompted us to launch an RFP process to try to create a more robust evaluation process. We usually receive more curricular materials than just one. So in this case, we went out and we sought vendors who qualified. Then we started the DTMAT process, which is the District Technology and Instructional Material Allotment Team, for new curriculum that's going to address the updated health standards that will go into place next year. The health standards were last updated 20 years ago. So these new standards require new curriculum materials. This process started back in September when the new charter rules were approved here, and then that charter was presented in December and approved. We started our DTMAT process through public viewings for staff in January. There were 14 different opportunities, both face-to-face and online, both in the morning and in the afternoons, for staff members to go in and evaluate materials. That viewing ran through January, and the voting took place the week of January 20th to the 26th. Those materials were then used to help drive the SHAC decisions, and Ms. Foxman, who is our SHAC chair, is just going to talk to us a little bit about what that process was and how we got to where we are.
Thank you, Executive Director Ruiz, and thank you to the Board of Trustees for having me here today. I'd like to briefly speak about the evaluation and voting process that led us to the recommendations you will receive today. The SHAC convened its first meeting on February 1st, 2022, where general orientation style information about the SHAC was shared, including how SHAC members would engage in the vetting process through individual review of the instructional materials, and also instructions were given about how and when members could access those materials. As you'll see on the graph, the gold band indicates the time frame in which members were personally able to access the materials through multiple channels, including a private digital viewing portal, office hours, as well as public viewing sessions. Also at this meeting, SHAC members were advised to fill out and submit the Community Advisory Committee Ethics Policy Statement in order to be able to actively participate and vote going forward. The SHAC also voted to continue to use a majority voting process for formal recommendations. On February 22nd, the SHAC meeting focused its discussions around the main and supplemental instructional materials related to K-12 physical education. The conversation started with a presentation from the Physical Activity and Fitness Subcommittee that provided the SHAC with a deep dive overview of the submitted resources. An open dialogue through verbal and chat box engagement then followed, and voting for the formal recommendations commenced when the staff directly emailed a Google form to those SHAC members in attendance at the meeting who had signed and submitted the conflict of interest form, allowing them to cast their votes electronically. I'd like you to please note that the same discussion and electronic voting process were used at all of the meetings and for all votes related to formal recommendations during this year's process. The meeting on March 9th was the first of two meetings where the SHAC formally discussed the health education main and supplemental instructional resources for all strands, including human growth and development, reproductive and sexual health, and also the prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. The dialogue around the health education resources included respectful discourse, as well as thoughtful questions and insightful comments. For example, SHAC members mostly agreed the Quaver Ed materials were developmentally engaging and scientifically sound for all health education strands for grades K through 5. Members also shared their observations about how much better the nutrition education for older grades was in the Goodhart-Wilcox materials, while other members expressed how much more comprehensive the McGraw-Hill main instructional materials were when it came to grades 6 through 12 reproductive and sexual health instructions. These discussions provided a springboard for the idea of using two main instructional resources for grades 6 through 12, McGraw-Hill for the reproductive and sexual health instructional strand, and Goodhart-Wilcox for all other health instruction. On March 29th, the meeting was a continuation and expansion of the health education dialogue, particularly around the idea of using McGraw-Hill exclusively for the grades 6 through 12 reproductive and sexual health strand. Additionally, discussions were also had around potential partnerships for curriculum over reproductive and sexual health, as well as the prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. The SHAC also concluded there is a need to make sure the district is offering its students the best possible reproductive and sexual health resources, especially given the smaller amount of curricula available from the state to evaluate this time around, and subsequently proposed engaging in an additional supplemental resource procurement process next year for the reproductive and sexual health instructions. On April 12th, the SHAC convened to have its final brief dialogue about health education instruction and then move forward with emailing the Google voting form to all SHAC members present at the meeting to provide their vote on recommendations for all health education for main, supplemental, and partnership instruction. As you can see, the process was thorough and completed with fidelity. And now it is my pleasure to pass the discussion back over to Chief Trejo to present you with the formal SHAC recommendations. Thank you.
Trustees, on the next two slides, you will see the recommendations from the SHAC for your consideration on a consent agenda item for the end of this month. The first slide represents the recommendations for physical education and health instructional materials laid out by particular grouped area. The last slide provides the SHAC recommendations for the sexual reproductive health curriculum and partnerships. Just a reminder again that this sexual health instruction does require a parent opt-in consent in order to participate. Any student who does not submit that written consent will not be able to participate in that instruction. On the formal partnership with the after-school programming, I just want to highlight that this particular after-school option is not taking place during the school day. It is an after-school option that does require principal and parent consent to participate, and that principal and parents are able to receive previews of the curriculum prior to participating in that after-school opportunity. Thank you so much for this